Buckle up,
Yeah.
baby.
Hey, Mikey.
Hey, we didn't put one out. We haven't put one out in a minute.
For
We
good
didn't feel
reason.
comfortable talking. Yeah.
Well, we talked amongst each other, but I think we had a good reason not to put out content.
Yeah.
You know.
In case anyone is not aware of why we might have been feeling that way. No, because my favorite podcasters have been putting out episodes like things happen all the time, and I'm just like, all right, like I don't like, okay, cool, I don't need to. They're just putting things out, and like Schultz, everyone, not making the Israel Gaza war right now, Israel-Hamas war, the center of their lives, and
Right.
for me, I have no interest in it at the moment.
Yeah.
But for you and me, that wasn't really possible.
Yeah. And you know what? Like, to that point, I don't really judge them too harshly for kind of moving on with their lives if they're not obviously as close to the issue as we are.
Yeah.
For everyone listening, we are obviously talking about the horrific events that took place in Israel. I'm just for anyone who might not be understanding what we're saying, I think it's pretty clear if you've ever listened to this podcast. This will be a more somber episode. But last Sunday, there was a horrific massacre of Israelis by Hamas terrorists in Israel. And Michael and I are going to share a little bit about how we processed this and where we were when we heard about this. But for people who aren't close to this issue, you know, I don't really see the hypocrisy in us being particularly outraged about this one versus other atrocities. And I don't necessarily judge other people who aren't close to this issue too harshly when they're not. What I object to is when, like, I've been called out, if I've been outspoken about it, because we could talk about that I have been. Oh, why the selective outrage, bro? Like, there's been all these other atrocities where I don't see you speaking out about that. And I think it's perfectly fair for people in our position who have relatives in Israel, family, close friends on the front lines, experiencing a personal tragedy. I think every human being understands the categorical difference from a personal subjective standpoint between feeling a certain sense of trauma and hurt when it's, your own children or your own family or your own siblings or your own friends. It doesn't mean the other atrocities of the world are not to be condemned or whatever, but it's like, don't dismiss our tragedy and what's going on with us and our community to distract from that with other things. I'm not judging you for not being close to it. Don't judge us for being close to it. It keeps bothering me, that idea. So I'm not judging Schultz or other people for not making this the center of their world, but it's the center of our world. So don't judge us for that,
Right. Yeah. So just before we get off any rails, we're not trying to put out an episode analyzing the situation or teaching anyone about the situation. We're just like two friends debriefing you, and we haven't had that much of a chance to like really chill and talk about how this whole experience has been going for one another. So we're just talking if people want to listen on and maybe get some distraction from it or relate to it in some way, like cool. If not, that's cool too. But we're not trying to break the situation down for anybody. Just two friends talking.
I may slip a few times, but 100%. That's not the
I know.
intention. That's not the intention here. What I was saying before is like, yes, other people have moved on and we didn't make content, but there's like, I feel compelled to explain a reason for that, given that we're not judging necessarily that it's not the center of everybody's world, but for us it very much is. And there's a good reason for that.
Well, it's instructive for me because I've never really felt before so on one side of one issue where I've been like, if you're not talking about this, you don't exist to me. This is like the first time. I mean, and when you and me talk, I'm always the devil's advocate.
Sure.
And more than devil's advocate, I really do kind of see both sides of every argument, kind of like David was saying. And especially in the Israel-Palestine conflict, like I've always, when Adela was here, like I've always been that guy that's like, well, can't you understand what they're saying when they say this and this and that?
Sure.
And now I'm fully on your couch. Like I'm fully just on, like I think a lot of people are feeling now. And that's a pretty unique experience for me. I feel like a right-wing nut, honestly. Like, yeah, man, like let's go in there. And it's a new thing, a new experience for me. And I don't know.
It's a fairly look. It's even new for me. I think in the aftermath of any trauma or feeling a sense of outrage and like, there's the vengeance, there's the anger part of it, but at the same time, I think for a long time there was this idea of sort of even people in the moderate center, not just like people who were just hippies and believed in sort of delusions of peace or whatever it may be, but like even at a certain point you start to think, okay, there's this presumption that what does the other side of an issue think about something? But I think in this case, like, it feels so illuminated to me that if you see like, it's undeniable, you can't turn away if you're at all engaged with this issue, not to be on one side, because it's crystal clear to me who the good guys and the bad guys are. And even in the cases of like the devastation in Gaza, that's all the focus now and not the reason why there's devastation. The fact that there's a response, like, to an act of aggression, like the focus to that, like, it doesn't mean you can't have compassion. It doesn't, I mean, it's understandable why your compassion would first be with the initial act of aggression towards you. And that, in other words, like October 4th, 5th, and 6th, none of that devastation that they're trying to throw in front of your face to distract from the tragedy against the Jews and shift the attention, none of that was happening October 4th, 5th, and 6th. So when I see that, I try to respond. I'm like, what happened on the 7th? And there's like that to me, there's such a moral failing there. And not to call me out if I get too much into the rant, but I just really, what is really personally hurtful to me and scary is the moral confusion in mainstream media and on campuses and these protests. There's this great moral confusion between aggression and retaliation, you know? And I know, well, it sounds, I just, like, there's such a confusion. All you're seeing is optics, and you're saying, oh, it must be this cycle, it must be this, but like, we know what happened. We know, like, it's so, like, it's so undeniable how this all occurred. And the whataboutism of it all is not just wrong in a political debate sort of way that I want to dunk on. It's morally bankrupt and corrupt in a way that you can now see in an illuminated way how atrocities of the past happened. And that hurts in a very deep way, because when when the truth is, like, revealed to you in a way, it's like, it's hurtful how real and true it is. Like, it literally, I compare it to like hearing a melody of a song that's resonant. You're like, ooh, that hurts. Or reading a book that makes a point that, like, tickles that part of your brain that is like, oh my God, I never thought of it that way. And in this case, the illumination of the moral failing of the people making excuses for outright deliberate massacre of Jews. And I know I'm ranting. I just can't help it. Like, that's what kills.
You said it well when you said it. What resonated with me is when you said it was scary. Like, it feels a little bit scary to me that the culture that I identify with most doesn't seem to care about.
Which culture is that?
The Thousand Jews. Pop culture, like independent media culture. You know, the Joe Rogan verse, the Crystal and Cigar universe, but even just like pop music and all that. Like, you know, mainstream American culture doesn't seem to think about good and bad as the same way I do it. They seem to be captured by something that I'm not captured by, and I feel very apart from it. And it's pretty scary. It's a scary feeling. It's a scary feeling.
What I'll say is, my understanding of that is, like, where a little bit of that is forgivable and where it's not is the narrative about Israel and the Middle East is that these ideas of it's complicated, you don't understand it, like, confuse enough people. It creates this cloud of confusion that I think for a lot of people to even comment on it at all feels hesitant, because you don't know, if you don't follow it closely enough, you're just left with a sense of confusion. But in this case, if you can't just come out and see it for what it is, then I'm just like, I don't know.
Yeah, like I watch Crystal and Cigar for my news. Like, I feel pretty connected to them as their audience member, and like and I feel this very strange sense of it's really important not to watch their interpretation of the events right now, because I know in my moral center what I believe, and over the next coming weeks and months, you know, the narratives are going to start and the plots are going to start and everything. And like, I feel like it's very important to like double down on like what you and I are talking about now, of like sort of knowing what we feel is true and knowing what the truth is. And these places I rely on to go to for helping me understand the truth, I feel like are no longer reliable for me.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. Let me ask you a question. Do you think we could go into this part of it, which I think will be an interesting area to think about. But if you want to talk about first the personal, I guess this ties into our
Yeah.
personal thing. I will say this. One of the reasons it's very hard for us to kind of forgive anyone who isn't taking a clear moral stance here, and at least for me, is that it's so obvious the good and the evil, where evil, what the side of evil and the side of good here to me is so clear. But at the same time, what I will say for people who don't like the way I've gotten a lot of information about this isn't through the standard sources of other issues of the world that we've experienced. Oh, I watch this channel, I follow this guy, this media outlet, this news media outlet, this like online one, legacy one, whatever, whoever it may be that I get information from. The way I found out about this was through my cousins, through people on the front line, friends who are at the scene of a massacre at a rave saying in a text, it's much worse than you think. Like when the initial reports are coming about how many people were killed and massacred, like what I was hearing was not a different report from like a removed primary source or whatever, or a secondary source.
So
I was hearing it from people who were there. So I
so
don't know
so
if
let
Joe Rogan was getting texts from people in Israel. You
right.
know what I mean? And I
Right.
don't know if
But
he's the
I want to go.
problem. But yeah.
I want to go back to that. So
Yeah.
where were you? Where were you? So Simchas, yeah. Where were you
So
last
this was
weekend
Shabbos
when you
day.
first
So
found
this
out?
is
Yeah.
I'm Shabbos day. I'm in shul. I'm in synagogue, and I remember, like the second before you hear the worst news ever or horrible news, there's a vibe that you subtly pick up on, but you don't know is there yet until it's like confirmed by something real. Like you were like,
Yeah.
there was sort of something in the air, like in
Wait. Sorry.
retrospect. I'm in shul sitting down.
You were at a big shul,
Yeah,
like a really
yeah. I
big
wouldn't
shul.
name any names
Yeah.
at this point. I'm more paranoid than I've ever been about life.
But I'm
I
saying
was at my
there's
synagogue and I'm sitting with a friend, and he goes to
no.
me,
But I'm curious though.
yeah,
Is it the huge one or the small synagogue? Which one?
smaller one.
The smaller one. Okay.
I'm sitting in
Okay. That's important.
yeah, I sat there with a friend, and he goes, "Yo, I hear crazy stuff happened in Israel yesterday, and it's bad. In Israel this morning, and it's bad." And unfortunately for us, like we've been like, okay, so like, what kind of bad? Like, what precedent? We've had many, like attacks, terrorist attacks, rocket fire, whatever. He's like, no, like next level. And then, the people who are less observant had more information than the people who were more observant. But very quickly, the entire mood, conversation, tone, everything, every phrase and every sentence in the synagogue was about this. And you're talking to security guards outside who are accessing their phones and people coming back. And it's like September 11th. It feels that whole thing like, what is going on? And new information each time. And each time you're getting updated, I was getting updated information. It was just worse and worse and worse in terms of death toll. And then, like, what is actually going on? This is not just a one-off attack that's now over. There's an invasion in Israel. Like the scariest stuff of nightmares. It's surreal. You cannot believe it's happening.
Yeah.
And you're just like, how could this be happening? How could this be happening? And it just gets worse and worse and worse. And I don't have my phone on because it's a holiday, so everything's kind of shut down. So it feels like almost old school atrocity, old school tragedy when you're hearing about stuff. It's like broken telephone. But the way people are talking about it is, and there's still like a second day of holiday where there's no electronics on, so you have to wait like 36 hours, 24 to 36 hours to actually get all the. And it's the images of my imagination. I couldn't even have imagined what I was about to face. But every friend I'm talking to who has access to this diplomat in Israel and this friend, who's updating, because some people turn their phone on to check in with family members to just to find out what's going on, like an emergency. But each time the death tolls, the numbers of people dead are going up. And then I think when I spoke to you, I think maybe you mentioned about rape and all these other things that just sort of. I think I spoke to you before.
Sunday night already. That was after.
I think I might have called you before I went to Twitter or went to news. Maybe just called you. I think I called you.
Really?
Yeah, and you said I actually think that I've heard stories. I looked at stories of mass and like whatever. Every possible atrocity one could imagine was verified and then some, and then it continued. Like people, and then you hear all the chatters. I don't remember even in what order. Apparently, they actually took people into Gaza. They kidnapped kids. But once you go on the news and you see it for yourself, it just got worse and worse and worse. The reality was worse than my imagination.
Yeah,
and
So I heard our shul is really small. Mm-hmm. There's only like a small like whatever. It's very small. So I heard at first, I saw people like upset about it, and like I think also because like we came of age during the Intifada, like we're very accustomed to hearing about bombings and things, and then I remember someone looked at me and they're like 100 people died, and I went like, 100? Like, oh my God, like that's a number I've never heard before.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but at my shul, really, people aren't on their phones. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's not like people are pretty serious there. So
Mm-hmm.
I did not understand the extent of it at all until like we were like dancing, we were drinking, we were having fun. Like we knew something was going on, and like we heard war, we heard ground invasion, we heard these things. There was an Israeli guy there who was like everyone was crowding around him. Like, so what did you hear? It was like it was very surreal, like very bizarre. So we're just getting like word of mouth updates.
Yeah.
Um, but I was not at all aware
You were not
of what was
prepared.
happening for 48 hours
Mm-hmm.
until it ended. And I also like I ended it late. Like I didn't turn my phone on for like an hour and a half probably
Yeah.
after. And then I saw my wife going on Instagram. I'm like, all right, this is where people are gonna get their news. This is how
Mm-hmm.
everyone's gonna find out about stuff. And then I went on too, and then I started realizing how horrific it was and how unlike anything else this was. And
I remember speaking to you, I
my
think before you had dug in, and you were like, "Yeah, I know, I heard it's bad. Like, what's going on?" Like, I heard it in your voice. You were clearly not yet exposed to the
yeah,
scale of what had just
and,
occurred.
right, and then you get it all at once. You
Yeah.
get 48 hours of social media
Mm-hmm.
in one sitting, and it's really overwhelming. It's too much to process all at once. And I don't think really until this week have I really started to like feel it. Like I have like moments that are really punctuated by like real like I want to cry. I'm just walking in the street and want to cry.
I mean,
And yeah, I don't know. Are you feeling that at all?
yeah, I'm feeling on multiple layers. Like, I think I pushed too hard. I mean, look, I made a conscious choice in a way to watch everything and consume everything I possibly could, as far as what I
Hmm.
could expose myself to. On I'll be honest, on the sort of there's sort of the I can't look away instinct on anything that's horrible. Like, what? Because if it's real, I have to see it in a way. There's something in me. But on the principle level, it's like I need to bear witness to this. Like, I don't want to look away. There's this idea of like, and Ben Shapiro, like on, did you watch the thing I sent you where he detailed all of it?
No, I'm on the we could talk about this. I'm on the other side of the spectrum
Oh
of
yeah,
you with that of
yeah.
looking.
I
I
look.
don't think
Maybe you don't
it's
need to. I don't judge
necessary.
anyone for how they do it. For
Yeah,
me, I
yeah,
felt personally compelled to make sure I saw the brutality and the barbarism
yeah.
because otherwise you won't believe it's really happening. In my case, it's like it's so hard to believe any like human beings are capable of this level of savagery and barbarism. It's so hard to believe it, and I think for a lot of people the instinct is it can't be so, and I think that's a real problem. But for me, it was like I have to see it, and I pushed to the point where I was broken by this past Friday night, like overload, like closing my eyes, seeing I saw something, one of the clips of kids like being held in captivity, babies by like Hamas terrorists, like being
Mm.
held and like taunted, and like I was just tossing and turning. I think I like don't feel bad for me. It's not what I'm asking for. It just the reality was in my case I was really shook, broken,
No,
and
dude,
effed up.
it's traumatic. It's traumatic for you too.
I
You're
know,
about
but
to have
in this,
uh,
it feels feel guilty saying that, given the people who are actually experiencing this and whatever, like, and people who've had families and children who were murdered. For me to even
obviously goes without saying.
goes
Yeah,
without
I
saying.
know
So I'm
that.
just like I hear myself saying that, and it's like it's a fetch that rubs me the wrong way, just to be honest.
Well,
But anyway, it
it's
f's me
well,
up.
no, it's
Mhm.
serious for you and me, especially you grew up with grandparents who survived the Holocaust, and the nightmare is always, even as a kid, and I think even as adults, is like, can the Holocaust happen again?
Mhm.
Like, like, will I be in a concentration camp? Will
Yeah,
I
yeah.
like obviously, and it's
That
maybe
was
it sounds
happening
silly to
to me.
someone,
That was
but
happening.
it's happening, and
Meaning
it's
as
fucking scary.
a-
Yeah.
as a child, you don't know when you're experiencing any sort of like traumatic effects from anything. But I used to have nightmares of Nazis coming into the house and taking me. Like I used to have that, and I used to like because like we didn't they didn't like my grandparents didn't sit me down and tell me and detail anything, but I just knew it was just before I could remember learning about it. That was the reality of Bubby anxiety. Like, oh yeah. They my parents didn't have grandparents. None of them had grandparents, and no one in their community growing up had grandparents. None of their friends had grandparents. Grandparents didn't exist in their
They
whole
were for
community.
Goyim. Grandparents were for
Yeah,
Goyim.
I'm saying they didn't exist. So it's just like it was just a default. So when you grow up with that as a kid, it's almost like, okay, but it still gives you this sense of like, it still gives you a sense of like, paranoia, fear, whatever as a child, which, and I will say, I came to the point where like friends of mine who are like neurotic and nervous, like, oh, it could happen in the States, it could happen to the Jews again. I would always be like, dude, we're in America, like just relax. Like, what's wrong with you? You're paranoid. And then for me, that wasn't my instinct. But I got to tell you, having seen the events that unfold in Israel and the celebration unapologetically of the slaughter of Jews, it made it was this illuminating moment where I'm like, I literally don't feel safe. I'm like, I don't know if the future of Jews anywhere in countries maybe besides Israel is like that instinct all of a sudden just was like lit up in me like a spark. I could feel it in my brain.
Mm-hmm.
The nightmare fears as a kid, which I didn't live with constantly, but they were there, but just knowing the realities of like literally two or three generations ago. And, for a long period of our upbringing, the Holocaust was not distant. It's distant. It's in a way, it's obviously with time more distant now than ever. But for me, it was like, the never forget, raising with that culture of never forget. And now you really sleep on it and you're like, here it is. And here are intellectuals in the West celebrating this as justice, not over land, like not over territory that's disputed, over like just Jews in Israel, and celebrating in a way, like there's a part of me I'll just say this and I'll end on this for a second. Like the only silver lining here is that at least it's not obfuscated. At least people aren't pretending that, at least they're coming out and saying who they are, and that they're celebrating and that they're praising like resistance of an oppressed people, but they're specifically celebrating Hamas, like people who want to kill all the Jews, and they're not making apologies about it. They're proud of it. So in a way, it's easier to like fight that evil and see it when it's right in front of your face. It's just undeniable. It's terrifying, but at least it's easier.
And for people who are, I can't stand hearing anyone talk about this situation without bringing up religion. Like, this is an ancestral blood feud that has gone on for thousands of years. Like, how can you talk about Hamas and Israel without talking about Islam and Judaism?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how could you talk about it politically? Like, as if this is like a political conflict. Like, as if anyone could do that for a political reason. Like, and no one talks about it. No one talks about Islam or Messiah or Al-Aqsa or like all these places. It's so insane to me. Like, it's such a waste of time to be talking about like the brutality and murdering of Jews without like understanding that there's
religious ideological motivation behind it. But
yeah,
I want to,
like, what do
but
they
I do
think
want to.
Israel's going to become once Palestine takes over? Like, it's going to become Tehran. It's not going to become like Seattle.
Yeah.
Like, this is how they don't understand first how these people think, and it drives me insane.
I will say, and not that this is needed to be said, but for the sake of not being misunderstood, like we are talking about like radical Islamic terrorism that's targeted against Jews, backed by regional states that support it, and not, I mean, like, we're not talking about generic Judaism and generic Islam for what that means. I think,
no, I'm talking about
yes,
in Gaza and Israel.
Yes, and the ideological motivations of Hamas and the fundamentalism that is calling for the extermination of not Israelis, Jews in Israel and worldwide. And the entire conversation is removed from that as if it's some regional dispute over a strip of land. Now, I don't want to get into the wonky history dispute back and forth. Maybe we can, but you're saying it's not the intention of this podcast to do that. Yeah. But no, what I'm saying is, what is so backwards here is, on the one hand, there is this pretend delusional view that that's what it's about, geography and politics and geopolitics, and ignoring what Hamas is telling you explicitly this is, and what Tehran is telling you explicitly this is. There's ignoring that, while on the other hand, celebrating the aims of that fundamentalist goal. Meaning, the people celebrating in the streets are not saying free Palestine for a two-state solution side by side with Israel. Yay! They're getting their independence from Israel and starting their own state. Like, no. They're saying liberate, exterminate, and calling for genocide explicitly. So like they are agreeing with the fundamentalist aims while denying the reason why those aims exist, and or pretending that isn't it. You know what I'm saying? Like to me, there's like a real glitch there, a real. I don't know what you call it, a contradiction.
It's almost
it's under the guise of a under the guise
how Hamas pulled that off.
It's a tactic.
How they co-opted this
idea,
movement for themselves, which then they would obliterate the moment they had a chance to do it.
And in terms of the sides, exactly. No, and also it's that's what it is. It's all under the guise of this regional, complicated, cyclical conflict over property. It's under the guise of that to confuse a lot of people in the West to say that that's what this is, but then the people in the West who celebrate it are actually celebrating the real true aims of eliminating Jews from the region. Like, so without going further on that, because it gets maybe too technical into the historical wonky stuff, all I'll say is like, the other thing that's interesting is when it comes to taking a side, I've gotten criticisms for videos I made. I was like, why are you so one-sided? And it's like, it's not just being on the side of Israel versus being on the side of Palestine. Are you on the side of certain principles versus the antithesis of those principles? And which side aligns more with those principles? So when I'm talking about it, even though obviously I have a connection to Israel as a Jew, first and foremost, I think any objective observer can see that that's not the reason why Israel is on the right side here. You know what I'm saying? It's not just because I'm not just taking a tribal, arbitrary stance. It's about the principles of human rights and decency and all these kinds of things. And you just see in which ways the two people at war act towards each other.
Yeah.
Sam Harris had an amazing 15 minutes of his podcast talking about the sin of moral equivalency. And
what did he say? I didn't read it. I didn't watch it.
Okay, so I don't want to go too much into it if we want to stay personal here. But
no, just tell me, because I would ask you off camera what he said.
It was. I mean, he's brilliant on this, and he basically said like a lot of different. There's a lot to it, but one of the examples that I thought was really crystallizes the whole. It tells you everything you need to know is on the topic of human shields, and that. Without a doubt, Hamas uses Palestinian civilians, innocent Palestinian civilians, as human shields, stockpiling weapons in their buildings and not letting them leave when Israel warns them to evacuate. And they use that as a deterrence because they know that Israel will be more hesitant to do a bombardment if there's more civilians there. He said, now just imagine for a moment if that tactic were reversed. If Israel decided to put its civilians in front as human shields to deter Hamas. We all know that that is the most ridiculous idea ever. Because Hamas's goal explicitly is to kill civilians. So the fact that Israel putting their own civilians as human shields, we would know that that wouldn't be a deterrent. And, so he basically compared the strategy of both, which illuminates the morality of each side and which side is morally correct. If Israel were to do that, what would happen? They would happily kill all the civilians in Israel. Because they did that anyway. You know what I'm saying? So that was one thing that I thought was super interesting. It was like to think about it like that. He said it better than I just did, but the idea being
that tells the whole story.
That tells the whole story. In other words, the fact that innocent civilians in Gaza are put up by Hamas as a deterrent to Israel, tells you everything you need to know. Versus if Israel were to do that, Hamas would happily butcher everybody with no hesitation, with celebration. So he also talked about other things about the fact that the accusations of genocide towards Israel, that they accuse Israel of genocide, the fact that Israel has the power advantage, right? And yet are accused of committing genocide. Israel could, if it wanted to, kill every innocent person in Gaza if it wanted to. They could commit that. They could do that if they wanted to, and they don't. What were to happen if the power dynamic were reversed? Well, we know what would happen if Hamas had more power over Israel. They would kill every single Jew in Israel, as they tried to do on October 7th. Right. We know what would happen in both cases. Israel has the power and uses restraint and doesn't do it. That tells you what you need to know in terms of that there is no moral equivalence between Israel and its enemies. So like, there's more to it. There's 2 different podcasts you should listen to on it, and I think it's very clarifying. I hope I did it justice a little bit. But anyway, and then there's all sorts of other examples he gives where you're just like, he talks about the moral failings of the progressives in our society who just failed. Betrayal.
Yeah, and it's weird, like you and me also are taking for granted the understanding that the only way to get rid of Hamas is to kill civilians because Hamas embeds themselves within the civilian population as a strategy to detract from their own. You and I take that for granted. We understand that and we know that. It seems like some people I'm listening to, again, I'm not listening to a lot, but even the few people I am seem to sort of like be a little bit willfully ignorant of that reality. And the only thing I can come back to is like, at the end of the day, they don't think that Jews being murdered is that big of a problem. I can't think of another way to explain it other than they've been seeing images of dead Jews their entire lives, like we've put out through Holocaust education, and there's just some sort of understanding that Jews die. It's just what happens. They die, and like that's just what happens. So what are you gonna go do? You're gonna kill a bunch of and
you could be right at a subconscious level. But I think for a lot of people, it's that level of thinking doesn't go that deep. I think what happens is
subconsciously. It's subconscious.
But
I don't think it's conscious.
Let's say I don't even grant that.
I don't think they'd admit to it.
It's more like there are some people whose initial instinct when they see atrocity or aggression, a violation of human rights, is we need peace. And there's a pacifism that permeates through people where simply seeing bombs and death and destruction on one side versus another side, intention, the moral high ground, none of that matters, because simply the idea of war, that is the problem. That abstract idea of war is the enemy, and that human accountability for who causes this or initiates this doesn't matter. It descends upon us as humanity like a spell. I really think people instinctively, especially if you go further left to center, they think no human being could ever really commit this or want to commit this. We all have the same values. We all have this, that's the assumption or the instinct people want to go to, because I think it's very hard for people to accept that there are people out there that happily want to do this or are motivated to do this. And maybe they turn away from the images of the concentration camp, or they don't want to accept that Hitler is actually committed to exterminating all the Jews. I'm giving them the best, being as generous as I can be. So I think for them, they just see bomb go off here, bomb go off there. Oh, all of that's bad. We need peace. They forget how you get to peace. They forget that war is hell and there's a means to peace, which is eliminating people who don't want peace, who are enemies of peace. Like, they just want to get to the end, and I think they see the optics and images just disturb them without ascribing intention or accountability over basically the who started it. When you look at an image of, if I were to show you a video of a man beating the crap out of a person, punching them in the face, you might go, oh, that's terrible. If I zoomed out and showed that man who was getting punched in the face first attacking the guy with a knife and killing one of his family members, you would look at that video totally differently, like zoomed out, given the proper, timeline and context of what you were seeing. You know what I mean? So I think people are just seeing those images. If I'm being as generous as I can be, they're not forgiving dead Jews. They're saying all death and war is equally bad, no matter the actors in it. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just this arena. And that's my most generous interpretation of their response. They condemn what Hamas did, but they also say Israel's just as bad because on both sides people die. So what's the difference?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So have you been regretting at all putting out videos, like getting yourself right in the middle of everything? How's that experience been for you?
I can't say I regret any of it at all. I think there are things that I made, there was a conscious choice for me. Like, I don't avoid consciously expressing any view. Like, I have no illusions about why people have followed me over the years and why people have enjoyed what I've been doing. It's for entertainment. I think entertainment is a valuable thing and an important thing. And I have deep views about comedy and music and stuff. I don't think it's a trivial thing either. I think it's really important. in a civil society to have comedy and celebrate it and be a comedian and do those things. Like, I feel deeply about that. I don't just like mindlessly do that stuff. And I always, like, there is a part of me that's like, why is this comedian person like getting preachy and annoying from the stage when people are there to see a song or something like that? But to me, this whole event is like well beyond politics. And to me, the fight for existing and preserving the principles in which comedy can even exist at all, that's how deep it goes for me. Like, to me, I kind of came to the realization tonight, not that I'm just going through like a personal sense of tragedy and trauma and need to speak out about it, but when when there's such a perversion of it that I feel a sense of fear in like the discourse and all of that. Oh, you're falling asleep. But when I feel a sense of, when I really felt that it's such a painful, maybe I couldn't identify it yet. I was like, I can't make a funny video here and I can reach people potentially that will preserve the sense that of principles and values that we can actually joke around together. Like, this is not going to continue in the long run. And I could sort of see down the road, like, we can't exist in this shoot the shit light way when such a gross atrocity and perversion and backwards morality is sort of existing and permeating. And not that I toot my own horn that I can make that much of a difference, but I felt like, for one thing, that's on like the macro. That's where I've arrived today about it, because I've gone through like a week of doing this. I'd say initially that wasn't my motivation, but I realize now, like, you have to say something about that, because not just for my own comedy, but for the idea of like being in a world where you can make jokes and joke around requires a certain level of agreement between people. We respect each other's differences. We have principles. We value human life and we celebrate human life. That's what comedy is. It's a part of celebrating. You can't do that in a tyranny. You can't do that amongst atrocity, in a way that's understood in the masses. So that's sort of like a deep philosophical place I've arrived at basically at this moment as we're talking. And initially, my motivations were like, this is beyond politics, so I'm not just preaching a political position among civil people here. There's this huge atrocity that's super personal to me that's taking place, and people celebrating it. And now it's the first time I've been through that in my life, and have a platform where there's potentially people who will hear, and I can make some sort of a difference about it. So I don't regret it. Like, I'm trying to change people's minds with different political views than me. You know what I mean? I'm trying to call out something, and there's enough people I could reach that can hopefully, not just for people who are anti-Israel, I don't think I'm going to change their mind, but for people who are pro-Israel but don't really understand how to properly express that, or how to make sense of these counter arguments that are coming and being thrown at them. So I saw gestures online of people trying to throw solidarity their way, but still falling into the traps of like moral equivalency, And so, like, I felt like if I have the ability to articulate something that can help myself and other people, if I have that ability, as well as in addition to making funny stuff, I got to try to use it in a certain way, not to sound and the risk of sounding hyperbolic or, dramatic. To me, that was all a self-consciousness that I had to just swallow, because it's, I told you originally, like, my initial reaction at first is like, don't go to social media and post a picture of a sad face crying, even if you're actually crying, because social media is performative. So my first instinct was, wait, let me call my friends in Israel. Let me call family members. Let me check in with the human beings in my life who are there. Then I first wrote something down, because that's not as performative. It's more matter, even though it is, it can be, it's void of tone and performance and all that. I don't want to distract from where I stand. And then once I started making videos, I know I'm still talking here, but once I started making the videos, I started to feel very good about the fact that I think for a lot of people, it was encouraging for other people to speak out who were afraid of leverage and followers and all that bullshit. And I feel completely happy and glad, and not happy, but even like fulfilled by the fact that, like, I feel validated that it was a real good that I was able to hopefully do, and maybe will continue to do. I have no regrets about it. I lost about 4,000 followers, and I do not care at all. It feels very different than when like a viral Gary Vee video popped off. That felt satisfying and good in a certain way, but this feels more like good in the way that something feels right and true. It feels close when a video like gets around and makes an impact in this topic, on this thing. It feels much more akin to, like, I don't know, like not to compare it to anything, but like when something in your life that's like really significant happens, but it's hard to, like I wish I didn't have to do it. And the fact that it's circulating is like it's a mix of pain and um, you know, whatever you want to call it. I feel good and it hurts that something like truthful is resonating. When you have your first kid, when you do something in your life that's like really meaningful, that's the space it hits more than like sweet a video's popular and viral. It didn't have that reaction to me. So no regrets. I know that was a huge rant, but like I'm trying to crystallize like that principle. There is a choice you consciously make when you take a massive shift in what people are used to seeing and whatever. Yeah, tell me.
If there was one video you could take back, which one would it be?
None. Wouldn't take like a single video. There's no video I would take back. I'm pretty careful and conscious of how everything goes out. And I made sure to try to like control, like not just and getting too much into wonky history and trying to feign like I'm a scholar. I didn't want to step into like that arena particularly. I know it kind of looks like that, but I'm basically calling what I see and I know like I've been educated in some ways about this stuff, but I didn't want to step too much into the, become a full advocacy channel that's all about history and unpacking things, only to where it's like sort of morally relevant because, in the ways where people are trying to downplay or distract from pure atrocity and horror and savagery, that's where the history is a little bit relevant. But I'm not trying to like educate everybody about a thing because I don't want to pretend to come off. I'm not trying to come off as like a scholar of this stuff. I make no bones about the fact that I've heard arguments about this and been educated about this and read what I could, but I'm not someone you're going to take authority from on specific things as much as just like representing the common sense person. Yeah.
You do not come off as a scholar. Don't worry.
Fuck off. No, but I know how it could sound.
I honestly haven't watched. I mean, like I wasn't kidding when I said I'm really trying to stay off social media. I haven't even watched your videos. I'm really trying to stay away from it.
Watched my content this week?
I haven't.
Oh, okay.
I've just been doing nice things for you and your family.
Okay, fine.
No, I haven't been doing that either. But
no, I don't feel bad about any of it. And each time, like, listen, and I know you have to be careful. It's tempting to just like go full on into a certain direction. And I try to make sure like I'm tackling a very specific thing with each video of things that keep coming up, a misrepresentation that keeps coming up, an apologist for atrocity thing that keeps coming up. And I try to be I try to be honest in it, like how I'm feeling about it, and not try to like no one, maybe people wouldn't believe it, but I'm trying not to have an agenda as much as it's like, look what I'm seeing here. Are you seeing this? And that's what I'm trying to do. But maybe you should watch a few of them before you ask about them because it's kind of hard to know.
No, because I'm really not interested. I mean, kind of like we said, like, we've talked a lot about it on this podcast, how like the algorithm and social media is like really could be like a virus and can really change your mind and change the way you think about something. Yeah. And like I'm really trying. I feel like my diet is incredibly important here about what I'm allowing into my headspace. And like I probably don't disagree with anything you said, but I don't the confrontation of all that, like it just feels like I can't have that in my diet. So I'm not watching yours. I'm not watching anyone else's. I'm not watching the confrontation happen on Instagram. Like it's just not part of my. I don't want that to be my experience of this whole thing. If that makes any sense.
I understand it. Yeah, there's a subtle difference for me about like, remember when Adela was on and she said like the trouble with the Israel-Palestine debates is like someone forgets their script and then someone forgets scripts and you know that they lost, and it's team sports level debate. This felt so beyond trying to dunk on typical talking points. This felt like a basic sense of good versus evil, right and wrong at the most principled level. And so that's what I was trying to address, and real glaring hypocrisies that you're seeing in the West and in our politics in America, and like leaders that are like standing in solidarity with barbarians who've committed this, like with the most like so it felt well beyond like, here's why my politics and my policies are right. I'm going to try to dunk on you, it felt way deeper and more fundamental than that, So therefore I'm okay with it seeming confrontational. I feel like there's only one side of it, not, it's not confrontational to call out a serial killer, You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
If there was a country just allowing a serial killer to roam free, and every time he murdered like a mass murder of 10 people, we said, let's try to figure out what's going on with the serial killer. What did we do to him? You know what I mean? Like
Right.
all these mass shooters, we don't take this position of trying to apologize for the mass shooter, you know? And that's where I felt like, yeah,
yeah.
what's up?
You canceled your show also. You're supposed to have the big show at Stand Up New York last week.
Yes, I did. I did cancel in the end.
You didn't reimburse anyone who prepaid for a babysitter
No, I
or anything
didn't.
like that. Are you still feeling good about that decision?
Very much. The tickets, the people. I'm so sorry for all of you people. I know it was a tough week, not losing $25. But no, for people who bought tickets, they'll be applied to the future show when we reschedule it. Okay.
What
But
did Stand Up New York like just say, sure, no problem, or were they like, how does that work behind the scenes when you say, hey, I'm
yeah,
just canceling my show?
there was when this was all going down, my initial instinct was not to cancel, was to say, as in any previous like atrocities or horrors you've been through, like no, we persist. In Israel, they always move on from terrorist attacks. So I was going to try to do that and maybe like do it as a statement of solidarity, and we were going to raise money for Magen David Adom or something like that as part of it, to sort of at least be cognizant of what's going on and show some solidarity in that regard. But this wasn't like a one-off terrorist attack. Like it was ongoing, and we're still in it. It's Israel at war. People are in captivity. So as the day went on, and I started reading more news and seeing like that potentially children were going to be broadcast being executed and hostages, not only would it have been an impossible hill to climb to assemble a bunch of Jews into a room who have family and friends in Israel and try to make them laugh for an hour, I didn't even want to accomplish that. That wasn't a hill I wanted to climb because of time and place. Like I didn't want to distract people from what was going on. I think it was the time to be outraged, not to heal and laugh just yet. There's like a whole stage of grieving. It's like, you're at the funeral, you're not at the Shiva, even or the 30 days. It's like at the funeral, don't start cracking jokes. Like, don't distract from people's pain. Like I didn't even want to. And imagine an hour before showtime, like all of a sudden videos start circulating. I'm like, forget me being able to perform and not being able to perform. It's not something I want to accomplish.
So, but what did Stand Up New York say to you?
So there was a little bit of a back and forth. Like we can do this, we cannot. But then I just like insisted. It was a little bit of a back and forth of a discussion, in good faith. Like we could continue, we could do this. But I said, let's just, first of all, it's going to affect attendance too. Like practically speaking, there were people who bought tickets who would not come. Not in protest to me, just they don't want to go see comedy. We spoke about this on the phone. That there would be people who just wouldn't be able to do it, and I completely understand it. I don't feel like doing it, so it was more like a practical decision and a principle decision to just reschedule and maybe do it in conjunction with a bigger event or something along those lines when we can properly do something that has more impact and meaning if we want to make it attached to something like that, if it's appropriate to do that. So I felt good about that, and I didn't get put pushback. I didn't really get pushback.
Have you seen what the Black Israel? Because I was just thinking, like, by the time you're ready to reschedule, either our YouTube audience maybe double the size or half the size that it is now.
I haven't seen anything from those factions, no.
So we have a bunch of Black Israelite followers because of our Harry episode. I wonder what they'll think of this. Have you seen anything online about that? Their interpretation of events?
Yeah, all the hate and stuff that I've been getting and all that has been from your typical, like, as expected places. To me, like, the stuff we did with Harry and the Black Israelite stuff and the Kanye stuff, that's one whole area of anti-Semitism. And I'm sure they are in line with the people, but they're not responding to this content per se or these videos. This is bringing out sort of the other underbelly of hatred of Jews and Israel, which is which is unpleasant, but at least you can see it for what it is. It's crazy.
Anything make you laugh this week? Any light moments that brightened your day?
I tried to send clips privately to Israeli soldiers in WhatsApps of different bits and stuff, not to be posted, like just to try that. And Tim Dillon has a way of doing it. That still,
He's pretty funny. Yeah,
I think
yeah,
he's calling out the ignorance of the masses. He does it in such a brilliant way. He embodies that as a joke. Like when
yeah,
he did a picture of a pelican in his story, and he said, "Is this Hamas?" Like that made
yeah,
me laugh a lot. And he can
yeah.
still
It's
do it.
funny.
He can still do it. I wonder what he actually cares
He
about in life. I don't know if he
he
cares about anything.
I think he's a little bit of a sociopath.
Mm.
I think he cares about himself. He's I listened to his Patreon this week. He's actually well informed.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't seem to care more than he cares about anything else. He had a funny joke where he's like my stance on the issue is I think both sides are completely wrong, which is
No, but
funny.
that's like so. The body.
It's funny. He's
But he's
fun.
he's
He's
brilliant.
really brilliant. He's able to make some pretty funny jokes. His Patreon episode with Ray Comp was making me laugh about the whole thing. But and I know, but then they'll go into to some sort of like
Ignorant
equivalence
place.
and yeah, I'm just like I can't listen anymore. And it's like I've never been like that. I've really never
No,
been
but
like that
I
before.
wonder if it for them is akin to like looking at, I don't know, Rwanda or like something going on in a removed part of the world that has nothing to do with them and no connection to them.
The way I
And for them
explain
they're
it,
seeing this and be like crazy stuff going on in the Congo. Like
yeah,
but
yeah,
replace Congo with Israel. So like if
yeah,
you have family in the Congo and you understand the injustice, crazy what's going on in Sudan. Seems like it's a
yeah,
wild world over there. I think that's as
yeah,
close as Israel is to him, you know? I
yeah,
think that's what it
yeah,
is. So in a way, would
yeah.
I say it's forgivable? But it's more like there's no reason why he necessarily would be feeling have more feeling towards it than like, whoa, crazy.
Right. I mean, I guess one of the things that bothers me is as underinformed about this as they are, they're
Yeah.
probably as underinformed about everything I listen to them about. And so that's also disappointing.
Uh-huh.
They don't really know what they're talking
They
about.
don't pretend to.
Um,
That's the joke.
Not like you and me, man. You and me know everything we're talking about always.
Yeah, no, I just mean like in the heat of the moment where we are, it's very easy to just be hurt by anybody not being as enraged as we are. But it's also
Yeah,
important to remember like this is our sort of tragedy. We are closer to this than, and it doesn't make it any less wrong or
yeah,
right in any scenario when a clear as day atrocity is taking place. What I
yeah,
can't forgive is justification, celebration, all of apologizing for it, explaining it. What I sort of can forgive in the long term is, you know, it's almost like if you and me had a really personal tragedy within our immediate families and Tim Dillon didn't text us, even though
hmm
he might be aware of it, he's like, but he doesn't know us. So he might not know this world. And like, I'm not forgiving it or letting it go per se. I'm just like, how could I hold him accountable other than like, other than how could I, how could he not easily confuse this issue with anything else? Like that it just belongs in the category of crazy human affairs. You know what I'm saying? It's very hard to remove ourselves objectively from it, but don't you see?
I still think I think it goes subconsciously deeper than that, but we're not going to resolve that here now anyway.
You could be right. I mean, to me, it's so sick.
Yeah,
Like, there's something interesting about when it happens to Jews and what happens, and when it happens to Israel, what happen? People's instincts. Like, I don't know. I don't know.
yeah. I mean, it's a little bit. It's yeah, whatever. I think maybe if we keep talking anymore, we're
It'll get
gonna
too technical. I can
say
tell you
things where.
what also hurt to me a little bit, and like maybe I'm calling myself out here a little, is like everybody within a day or two in the online sphere going into their corners, like having their hot takes on something like
Mm,
this, as opposed to just being human. Maybe it's just a sad state of where things are, but like I saw people I respected during like the COVID stuff then go into their corners and start calling conspiracy and saying, don't be fooled by the propaganda. And I'm like to dehumanize people to the point where we're saying it's all propaganda. These are all the powers that be that are manipulating you, the puppet masters that are warmongers. They sort of are just removing it from the human tragedy of what's happening and just calling it, once again, all part of the political games. Don't be fooled. Don't be trapped. You know, those people, that's the things they had to say online. And that's the things they felt like typing up. Like, once again, Ukraine's being distracted. And then the Israeli flag comes in, like to me, there's something so just ugly about that, and just like
Mm-hmm.
inhumane about that, like dehumanizing about
Yeah.
what's going
Yeah.
on. To say like, here's another one. And it's like with 9/11, that took like 2 years to start to happen. Like
Yeah.
there was a
Well,
moment.
everything's so quick now. Everything's so
Yeah,
quick.
yeah. So to see that happen in real time so fast at such hyper speed was painful. Like
Yeah.
9/11, there was months of like just grieving and like this is just so sad and terrible. How it all happened is yet to be determined, and what's going on, and who benefits, who doesn't, who this and that. But like to resort to that same hot takes of deep state party politics nonsense right away
Yeah.
was such like to me a
Yeah.
dismissal of the human
It's
tragedy of what's happened to Jews in Israel, like intentionally.
it's also I saw some conspiracy stuff from from Israelis talking. It's so funny like how smart they think they are, but how they're saying exactly what QAnon said. Like in America,
Mm,
it just transferred to Israeli politics. Like
yeah.
it's just this cookie cutter thing.
Hmm.
It's funny to me that humans are humans. No, whether they believe in God or don't, or live in Israel or Pakistan or whatever, the same conspiratorial framework will work on your mind, no matter
Yes.
what's going on. So like, it's interesting. It's interesting.
It's like the
It's
9/11
interesting.
truthers
There's
saying
something nice about
that
it
didn't
almost.
happen. What you just saw didn't happen. The truthers who were like, that wasn't like we saw two planes go
Well,
into two
nine
buildings.
eleven's different. Nine
Stop
eleven's
it,
different.
stop it, stop it, you animal. But you know what I'm saying. The fact that it happens within 24 hours versus a year later when there's a reckoning and people are trying to figure out and make sense of it in the vacuum was also
Yeah.
just hurt.
No.
That was just pure hurtful. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, have you no decency? Have you
Yeah.
no decency? You have to tweet like, up, the warmongers are at it again. Like, what? Like, and some of these people were people like I agreed with strongly in other scenarios when they were talking about other issues, not other atrocities per se, but other things to be discussed. I kind of respected their opinion, but I was very disappointed to see a lack of empathy, for what had just happened 2 days earlier.
Yeah.
Like that was
Yeah.
kind of, it's like someone coming to your after a funeral. If a family member was murdered and starts telling you, okay, I have all the facts about this, you want to hear? It's like, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here mourning the loss of people, and you're
Yeah.
like trying to tell me all these. Did you know that he worked for this? Like,
Right.
that's what I mean. It's so detached.
How are your kids dealing with it? Are they
Um,
picking up on things that are happening?
yeah, but kids everything for kids is new. There's a novelty to everything. So I think kids process this in the same way they process like the adventures of everything they watch in fantasy, like good and evil, good guys, bad guys. Like there's a war, it's scary. They certainly feel the anxiety, the subconscious anxiety of everything going on. They could feel that.
Yeah, they do.
Um,
Yeah.
they pick up on that, but we try to refrain from like making sure they
Yeah.
don't get exposed to anything too graphic or whatever. But you give a sense of security, like that things will
Yeah.
be okay. I'm sure for kids in Israel, it's like it's a very different, it's a different level, but
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
try not to be too over.
Something
But
I've
they
been
definitely
trying to
hear things. They
be
definitely hear things. So.
something I've been trying to be conscious of is not like looking at stuff on my phone about it
Mm.
and then shutting it off and looking at them, because I feel like all of whatever you see on your phone like goes into your expression, and then you
Yeah,
look at your kid and they like get all of that, whether or not you say it or express it or show it to them,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the image,
They
they're
pick
still
up on this.
getting it. Yeah, they pick up on something.
I think the biggest
Yeah.
mistake I've made, the biggest mistake with regard to the kids that I've made, and I couldn't help it, was not that they've been exposed to too much tragedy, but that they've seen me completely distracted. Completely distracted. Both. Like as parents, we're
Hmm.
just totally distracted and consumed.
Yeah.
And they like notice we're just not there in this
Yeah.
past week. I mean, it's a week of life, but like, and they pick up on like our detachment, like constantly trying to get our attention and constantly trying to this. And we're like, I'm constantly, yes, 1 second. How many times can I say yes, 1 second? Because I'm getting an update or looking at something,
Right.
And I caught myself doing
Yeah.
it, and it's forgivable, for myself, but like, that's a mistake. Like I should just still be able to
Yeah.
control time so that they're not neglected attention wise.
Yeah.
But
All right,
anyway,
maybe we could stop. We can end there.
But let's
This
talk
was
about the
good though.
Ottoman Empire. I think is important, Michael. So yeah. So I hope I wasn't too. I mean, I know I go there because
No,
I go there.
no. So no, I don't think it was too much. It's nice to I ran into someone in the parking lot in the grocery store last week. We ended up talking for on Friday. Ended up talking for like 20 minutes. Just my door, the window to my car was open, and the window to his car was open. Like, people are not yet talking or debriefing with each other. So I'm glad we have this. Maybe people will find it helpful to hear us talk about it. And
it does give you a little bit of a sense of perspective of like all the trivial problems, interpersonal problems we have with each other.
Oh my God.
You're just like, nobody bothers me. There's no real problems in life. When the forces of like darkness and good and evil are right in front of us, it puts everything else in perspective. Like you feel like unity with everybody, and you're just like, love everybody who deserves to be loved, and you're like, or who is worthy of it in some capacity, even if like that game we play in peacetime, the bickering that takes the this, the that, like that all goes on pause for a minute, and you're just kind of put in a sort of very binary place,
Did you go to shul Friday night?
This past? I don't think so.
Yeah.
No.
So there was just like a little bit of a movement to like go, even if you don't usually go. I usually don't, but we went as like a family, which has never happened before.
Yeah.
The feeling of like unity around the world that I felt there, like our soldiers, and it was really, really moving, really, really, really moving. It was something real.
It feels all real. You know how we always exist, you and me especially, like in a playful place, light place, like tongue in cheek as best we can, because life is painful and we try to have fun with it, with the little adventure that we live.
Yeah.
But these moments and these events take us out of that little game for a minute and put us in a different place where it's like everything, it's hard to say anything not genuine at the moment. Like I find it hard. I find it hard to kibitz and say anything that isn't really genuine in a weird way.
I have jokes that I wanted to make, but like it feels very about everything today, but in this conversation, but it doesn't feel appropriate.
I'll end by saying in a way where it always sometimes there's a struggle in a way at a time when it's generally hard to be genuine and sincere. It feels hard to be disingenuous and insincere at the moment. You know what I mean? It's hard. Like I'm struggling.
And it's a wonderful place to. I think it's a wonderful place to be.
Yeah.
Obviously.
You don't want to be there too often. You don't want to be there too often, but it does feel that way.
Right. All right.
I'm Israel Chai, Michael.
I'm Israel Chai.
Oh, that is Buckle Up episode 7. I can't do it. Buckle Up episode 74. Good talking to you, Michael.
Yeah, you too. Try to get this up, and hopefully no big updates before we put it out.
No big updates. Nothing is as important yet as
can you compose like a somber version with like violins orchestral for our outro music?
I totally could. 74. Buckle up. You better buckle up. Yeah. With my tsunami.
We don't usually have words in the song, but that might be nice.
Maybe it's time.
Yeah.
I did think of a song I wrote in this thing, and I had this whole vision. Maybe it'll come true when the time comes and the dust settles to put together a song with like every artist I've ever even worked with or come across, or to put together a massive, meaningful. It's very hard not to be cheesy doing that, but I had a cool hook idea that I think could be
cool.
Could be cool.
Matas just put out a song.
That's who I had in mind. What did he put out?
Yeah, it was ripples turn to waves or something like that.
Yeah.
Awesome line. I didn't. It was an awesome line. Were you part of that?
Ripple, no, but there's a different one we'll be releasing soon that I'm on.
That was a cool song. I liked it. I heard it on the radio, I think. No, I didn't. I heard it on Spotify.
I had this like hook idea. When the forces of darkness start to rise, stand on the side of the light. Something like that.
Nice.
No,
I could if you want me to be in it, I'll be in it. Sure.
I thought of this hook, and now I'm debuting the
I don't
hook
know
now.
what
Don't
I'll do.
steal it. When the forces of darkness start to rise, stand on the side of the light. It's like I could see like a reggae anthem kind of thing.
Yeah.
Don't
Cool.
allow it. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And when the forces of darkness start to rise, do what's right, stand on the side of the light. You know, something about that.
Yeah.
Not bad, right?
Can
you hear that?
Yeah, it's good. It's good. I don't know. It didn't.
You don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then again, you listened to Yishai Rebo once and then said later on he's the best, so I don't trust you.
Hey, fair enough. Fair enough. No, I'm pretty generous with you when I think something's great.
I know, but you have to. I hear the production and the whole thing, and maybe
Right,
other
cool.
people. It's gonna be amazing.
It's been nice watching videos of Yishai Rebo and you know like playing for the Chayalim, but also seeing Rudy Rachman actually
so
serve
hot right
is
now.
like, whoa, oh my yeah, dude, it's so freaking sexy that bit. Whew.
Yeah, the Yishai Rebo stuff is incredible. It's just incredible. That's what I mean. Like being hard to feel insincere. It's like, wow.
Yeah. You know what though? I take that back. We're joking. When I saw him in the thing, I didn't think he looked sexy. I was actually like, oh, bro, I forgot you're like risking your life.
Yeah, I'm joking.
I'm not like that.
I'm trying to joke now about it. I didn't feel that way. I was like, wow, man.
No, but it's worth noting. I think that usually it's like fun, but like it doesn't seem fun, and it doesn't seem like it's pretty. Yeah.
It feels just real.
Anyway,
that's what it is. It all feels real. Real is the best word I can say. Just so real. And it hurts.
Yeah.
Really out like truth in like it just hurts. You know. Anyway. Jordan Peterson has been asked multiple times, how does it feel like, what's it feel like to be you and the impact you're having on people? And he said it hurts. In a way, he said it hurts. And he often is brought to tears in these interviews because when you're been told 15 times a day that you've changed somebody's life for the better and they couldn't have done without you, like the truth of that, when you're trying to tell the truth the best you can, it hurts. It's overwhelming. It's not like it's a bad thing and you're not complaining about it, but it really hurts. And I can feel that in a certain way in this moment, like trying your best to just tell the truth and do what you can do for what's like right in the world. It hurts.
I think that's what art is.
Yeah.
It's a good argument for a real art should hurt.
Yeah.
I like that.
It hurts. All right, Michael. That's it for
Buckle up 74.
That's it for today, my little cherub. Ending on the words of Mrs. Doubtfire, dear. Some people have one mummy, some people have one daddy or grandparents, you know, dear. I think closing with the closing monologue of Mrs. Doubtfire is probably the way.
Do you know it by heart?
Oh, dear. And if you find it, if there's love in your heart, dear, you'll find... Oh, no, I don't know it by heart, dear. I wish I did, dear. Oh,
you should.
I did.
You really should.
But if there's love, dear, those are the ties that bond. And you'll have a family in your heart forever.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.